Hi YouTube, Regina here. So today's video, I wanted to talk to you about buy now, pay later schemes. But before I do that, let's first talk about cash versus credit because I have interesting statistics I wanted to share. And I love sharing what I find interesting. So almost 60% of consumers prefer using cards. Americans have an average of 3.8 credit cards on average. And it really depends on the state and the region. I think down in the South, they're more likely to use cash. I think New Jersey had the highest credit card per person, and Alaska had the least. And then cash represents 19% of all transactions in the US. But very interesting to note, 80% of those cash transactions are for payments under $25. And typically what happens is most of the payments, at least 50% of the payments that are under $10 are cash payments. And there's a reason for that because a lot of retailers will require you to use at least $10, at least where I am, if you're going to be making a purchase. So it kind of makes sense that at least 50% of the $10 and under purchases are used with cash. But think about that, 19% of transactions in the US are cash, and 80% of those are under $25. So 40%, 46% of consumers use a cash back card, and people are willing to spend 100% more on when they use credit cards versus cash. And there was a study done that actually proved this. Let's see, think of the study. I think it was the name of the study was called Always Leave Home Without It. And so what they did is they gave some people cash, and people admittedly carry cash to avoid overspending. And they say the biggest reasons they do is to better manage their finances because they know they might go to a location that only takes cash. They use it to leave tips. 10% of them say they do. And other people carry some. About 35% of people carry some cash on them for in case of emergencies and for small purchases. But the amount of cash people carry on them tends to be on average $46. So if you open the average person's wallet, you'll find $46, which is interesting because the other day I ended up finding 40 something dollars in my computer bag. So $46 is what the average person carries around. So with regards to this Always Leave Home Without It study, they were able to prove that participants were willing to spend 100% more when paying with a credit card. And so what they did is they gave one group cash, one group was required to pay with cash, and the other was allowed to use a credit card. And both groups needed to decide by 5 p.m. what they were going to do. So in this study, participants were given, they were auctioning off tickets to a sold out game, and the participants had to write down their bids. And then they found out that participants who paid cash were paying less. So for the Celtic tickets, participants were willing to pay $29 when they were paying with cash versus 61 when they were going to use a credit card. And when for the Red Sox, they were willing to pay $9 and $16 with a credit card. And then for the Banners, I never heard of them actually, $3 versus $5 for these auction off tickets. And so this was again the study called Always Leave Home Without It. So they actually were able to prove that people typically spend, up to 100% more. I think the average was 83% more is what they found. And that makes sense. You go to a restaurant and you look at, what you're going to purchase. If you have cash, that appetizer might not look as appealing to you, just like you might be able to skip it. But if you're paying with your credit card, it doesn't feel like you're spending as much money, or it feels almost like a treat in a way. But make no mistakes about it, when you're using a credit card, you are basically borrowing money from a bank. The bank determines how much you get to spend, and they set your limits. And if you go over those limits, there are significant fees that you'll get hit with. So it really depends on someone's credit score, their credit worthiness, how long they've established credit. And there are reasons why people want to use a credit card. I mean, a lot of people like using credit cards because of the cash back feature, and because of the security feature of, like, if you lose cash, you lose cash. But the fraud protection you get on credit cards, it makes a lot more sense, but you still only covered in the amount of $50. You still have to outlay $50 if you were to have fraud against you, like on your card. You could be liable for $50, which incidentally is more than the $46 that most people carry around them. I found that to be interesting. As far as paying with cash versus paying with credit, the digital marketplace is now 132.5 billion dollars as far as online purchases are made, which is very interesting, because in the way of a lot of that money is being spent on, PayPal and buy now, pay later kind of schemes that go on. So the global digital payments, I'm sorry, 132.5 billion they're expected to be this year. And the global payment market size is estimated to reach 2 trillion this year. So payments beyond digital, on digital payments would be things like, buying anything online. And then the global payments markets would be buying, in retailers as well. So overall, the whole market is expected to reach 2 trillion this year. And the digital global marketplace is expected to reach 132.5 billion. So it's a big percentage of the money is being spent online. And so some of the top companies for payments are PayPal, Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan and Chase, Wells Fargo, and then of course Apple. So those are the biggest retailer, banks that are out there for payment markets. Now let's go into the buy now, pay later, because typically what happens is when someone is using a credit card, the retailer charges 1.5 to 3% to the retailer for the use of the card to be able to collect a payment. So they'll do it because consumers are willing to spend so much more when they use credit. Having access to credit makes sense for a business. But more and more lately, businesses are turning over those fees to the consumer. So you can see in certain restaurants or stores, maybe not a store so much, but they can pass on those fees to consumer, and you'll actually see two bills. You could see if you pay for cash, you could have that discount on your bill and you're not going to be charged the fee. But if you're going to be using credit, they'll actually charge you 5% more to use credit cards in certain restaurants. And I spoke to a restaurant about this in Florida. There was a restaurant that was doing this that originally never charged. On every bill that they gave you, they just have to stipulate that they are going to be charging you and reveal to you why they're going to be charging you that fee if you plan to use a credit card. And this restaurant owner told me that they spent a total of $86,000 the year before in fees just to be able to use a credit card. And so in them, that was a lot of money that they were paying out to allow the consumer to use a credit card. And so it's become much more commonplace for restaurants and storefronts to charge a different amount to allow someone to use a credit card. But the interesting thing on the buy now, pay later, so it's commonly a practice that is now being used to allow people to make purchases and make those purchases not feel as much. So it's consumers are being tempted to defer and delay payments. But essentially, when you're using a buy now, pay later scheme, you're actually paying more for that service. It's almost the same as when you're using Uber Eats. Uber Eats, the charge on the meal will end up costing more. So the menu items cost more than if you were to go and buy it from the restaurant itself and pick up your own food. And it's this what ends up happening. It typically costs 8.5% more to use a buy now, pay later scheme. So they'll end up be passing along that amount of money to the consumers. So it's often 2 to 8% of the purchase price goes to buy now, pay later schemes. So you're using a bank on top of a bank. So if you're using your credit card, if you originally were using the credit card, now you're going in and it's almost like a bait and switch. You're using now a different credit card to be able to make the payments. So there's a charge to be able to use the credit on top of the credit in that way. So the merchant often pays 2 to 8% more of the purchase price, and it leads them to higher retail prices that gets passed on to the consumer versus just paying for it outright with cash or credit cards. And then some businesses will offer discounts to customers just to pay up front, but because you are paying interest, there are retailers that will actually entice you to choose a plan where then you're going to be paying additional interest to use it. So you get finance charges on top of finance charges. Even if some of them will show you that you're paying 0% if you're doing a buy now, pay now, buy now, pay later if you do it under, 3 months. But if you go with 6-month plan, they're spreading out the payments, making you feel like you're not spending as much. But it is actually hidden in the fees. Because if you miss any payment, there's often a $5 to $10 fee that is added on. Then services could be blocked. You might not be able to use your card if you don't pay it. And then, of course, the debt can accumulate. If you're doing a lot of these buy now, pay later schemes, what happens is you're just adding payments on top of payments and you're spreading out the payments and you're actually, in theory, spending more money over time. But reality is there are so many more retailers using, this buy now, pay later scheme. So it's going on with online shoppers and e-commerce. So you'll find it in Amazon, in Walmart, in Target. That they'll show it at the checkout. You'll find it with fashion and electronics, and then you'll find it through. They'll either offer you things like Affirm, Karma, Afterpay, PayPal, Pay Later, and then you'll also find it on travel booking sites for flights and vacation packages. And then, of course, there's also in-store retail purchases. You'll find it in clothing stores, shoe retailers, department stores. They're trying to encourage you to purchase more. They realize when you're spreading out the payment, it almost is making you feel like you're spending less. And in reality, you're spending a lot more. You'll see it at electronic retailers like Best Buy. They're now offering for their higher ticket items for laptops and for smartphones being spread out. You'll see it at home improvement stores like Home Depot and Lowe's. And particularly, they'll allow you to do these kind of buy now, pay later programs on appliances or renovation material. Then you're also going to see it at automotive and transportation. So if you need any kind of car or maintenance repair, and it becomes really costly and expensive, you will see that they're starting to now offer buy now and pay later plans to cover the cost of maintenance and repair on your vehicle. When it comes to electronic bikes and scooter companies, they now have a financing option that does it as well. And then it also is happening in healthcare and wellness. So you'll see it in dental offices. You'll see it in, I know I did the Invisalign, and I did the Invisalign going back about a year ago, and they offered that as a plan. Of course, I didn't take it. If you know me, I don't do things like that. And so, anyone who's doing any kind of cosmetic surgery, they have buy now, pay now plans. Fitness equipment, subscription services. So even Peloton is now has a buy now, pay now program to boost their sales. And then, of course, it's in with luxury and high-end goods. So I think what ends up happening is that they're trying to make the expensive items more accessible to the masses. And in reality, the people that are really buying the high-end prices are the people who really can't afford them. In reality, is like they're marketing to the individual. So the luxury high-end items, even when it comes to designer and fashion items, you have a lot of buy now, pay later schemes trying to get you to spend more money. And this is high end items as well on gaming consoles, on premium smart plan payments. And then, of course, there are the subscription and digital services. So you have the software companies that are now doing it. Of course, if you want to pay, they have plans that can structure payments if you're doing anything with Microsoft and Adobe. So everyone seems to be getting in on it, including streaming services now are doing the payment plans, fitness programs, and of course, online courses, everything, every way they can get you to start spreading out the membership or spreading out your plan. So instead of paying once and done, you're spreading out the payments, you don't actually feel them. And then when it comes to holiday shopping on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you will see a lot of buy now, pay later. And so what ends up happening, it's a convenience and it gives the illusion that people are not spending as much as they are, and it increases people's ability to on for discretionary spending, and that puts them in a very tough situation because the cost again are built into the price. And so even though you think you might not be paying extra for these items, you are paying extra for the items. There's a lot of interest, so you're paying, it's essentially you're borrowing money from a bank and then borrowing money from another bank to be able to use these buy now, pay later schemes when you could have put things on layaway. You could have done a layaway plan instead. There were retailers that used to allow you to buy items and pay for it a little bit over time with no fee, and they would hold on to the item until you paid for them. I know Marshall's used to do that because one of my sisters used to work there, and she used to purchase a lot of her jewelry on buy now, pay later, and so nobody else could purchase the item, and it would be held for her and she paid for it a little over time with no exorbitant fees. So buy now, pay later programs, I think, ended up coming from that, that means of being able to hold on to an item and pay for it a little bit over time. But now it comes with hidden cost, late fees. It's built in the same way as Uber Eats charges you more for the food because its inflated prices are covering and hiding the hidden fees that go in to pay for the cost. So if you are considering and if you're doing any buy now or pay later schemes, once you are done, stop using them. The cost of the items end up costing more because they have to pay extra to be able to. So any item that has buy now, pay later built in means it's costing you more. So just know that when you go to use those things, they're hidden in the cost and nothing given is free. So it's all there. Anyway, I found this to be so interesting, and for me, I think it encourages, higher spending. I think people should go back to using cash. Cash should be, as far as even if it's using debit cards, try as much as you can just to go back to using debit cards. I'm not saying don't carry a credit card. It's good to have an emergency. But even if you're getting cash back on your credit card, you'll get to see how much you're actually spending. I try to only cash in my cash back once a year. So I actually know how much I spent on my credit card each year. So I let the cash back build up for each year. So let's say if I got $300 back, I know exactly that I spent $30,000 in the year on my credit card, for example. I think that's the 1% cash back. I know it changes, and in some, you get 2% on certain items and 4% on certain items. But I always found it interesting to see the amount of cash back that I would get on the amount of spending that I would do. And I found once I started watching, my spending went down. But I tend to use my credit cards when it comes to paying for bills, a lot of the bills, so I can get the points and I can keep my credit score up high. And in the event that I end up going and buying another property in the future. But anyway, I do not use any buy now, pay later schemes. But I did find it interesting when they first were coming out, and I was like, wow, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. And it tends to be more of a problem with certain, I think it's a generational pull because I do think that younger people are more likely to use buy now, pay later schemes because it's just something that they're used to seeing. But people who are Generation X or the boomers or the silent generation, it's probably not something that they were doing because we grew up in a time that it didn't exist. Anyway, I hope that you found this today's talk interesting, and hit me up in the comment section if you use a buy now pay later scheme. If you use cash, typically what is the amount of cash you carry in your wallet, and then if you have how many credit cards that you carry. I probably have more than the 3.4, but I tend to, I'm trying to think, because I have a JetBlue card, I have um, an American Airlines card, I have an Amazon Prime card, and then of course I have a Chase Bank card. So I think I'm over the 3.4 as far as my credit cards, but I pay my balance off every month. So there is that. Anyway, hope this found you well, and I hope everyone gets to enjoy Sunday Night Football and the Super Bowl. Take care.